My daughter excluded me from my grandson's birthday. I only want close family there, don't come. She had no idea my gift was a 500K beach house. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. The phone rang at exactly 2:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. I remember the time because I was sitting at my kitchen table, carefully wrapping Tommy's birthday present with the special paper I'd bought, the one with little sailboats on it, because he loved boats so much. At 5 years old, my grandson was obsessed with anything that floated. "Hi, Mom." Sarah's voice sounded different, distant, cold in a way that made my stomach clench immediately. "Sarah, honey, I was just wrapping Tommy's gift. You won't believe what I found for him. There's this—" "Mom, stop." The sharpness in her voice cut through my excitement like a blade. "I need to talk to you about the party." I set down the ribbon I'd been holding, my hands suddenly trembling. "What about it?" "I'll be there Saturday at 2, just like we planned. I even took the whole day off work. At 72, I still worked part-time at the local library. Not because I had to, but because I loved being around books and helping people. It gave me purpose. Especially since Richard passed 3 years ago. That's the thing, Mom. Marcus and I have been talking, and we've decided we want to keep this year's party small. Just immediate family." The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the edge of the table, staring at the half-wrapped present in front of me. "I am immediate family, Sarah. I'm your mother. I'm Tommy's grandmother. You know what I mean." Her voice carried that tone I'd heard so many times over the past few years. The one that suggested I was being difficult, unreasonable. "We want it to be intimate. Just us, Marcus's parents, and his sister's family. You understand?" No, I didn't understand. I didn't understand how my own daughter could exclude me from my grandson's birthday party. I didn't understand how Marcus's family, people who barely knew Tommy, were considered more immediate than the woman who had raised Sarah single-handedly for 18 years. "Sarah, please. I've been looking forward to this for weeks. I have something really special planned for Tommy. Something I've been working on for months. Mom, don't make this harder than it needs to be. We've made our decision." I closed my eyes, feeling tears start to burn behind my eyelids. "What did I do wrong? Just tell me what I did." Silence stretched between us, filled only by the ticking of the old clock on my kitchen wall. Finally, Sarah spoke, and her words shattered what was left of my heart. "It's not about what you did. It's about what you didn't do. You were never really there for me. Mom, always working, always tired, always somewhere else. Marcus helps me see things clearly now. Marcus. Everything always came back to Marcus these days. Ever since Sarah married him 3 years ago, she'd been pulling away from me bit by bit. At first, I thought it was natural, a new bride wanting to focus on her marriage. But this felt different. This felt deliberate. "Sarah, I worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat after your father left. I was there for every school play, every scraped knee, every nightmare. Just don't, Mom. I can't do this right now. Tommy's party is family only, and that's final." The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone against my ear for what felt like hours, listening to the dial tone, hoping she might call back and tell me it was all a mistake. That of course I was invited. That of course she wanted me there. But the phone stayed silent. I looked down at the present I'd been wrapping. Inside that box was a small wooden sailboat, hand-carved by a local artisan. But that wasn't the real gift. The real gift was hidden upstairs in my bedroom safe, the deed to a beachfront cottage in Myrtle Beach, worth $500,000. I'd bought it 6 months ago with the money from Richard's life insurance and my own savings. Every penny I'd managed to put away over the years, every sacrifice I'd made, had gone into purchasing that little slice of heaven for my grandson. I'd imagined teaching him to fish from the dock, building sandcastles on the private beach, watching him grow up with a place that would always be his. The cottage was supposed to be his inheritance, his security, his connection to the grandmother who loved him more than life itself. I'd planned to give him the deed at his party, to see his little face light up when I told him about his very own house by the ocean. Now, as I sat in my empty kitchen with tears streaming down my face, I realized how foolish I'd been. How naive to think that love and sacrifice meant anything to the daughter I'd given everything to raise. I picked up the deed from where I'd hidden it under Tommy's present. $500,000 worth of love, reduced to a piece of paper that would never be opened, never be celebrated, never be the bridge back to my family that I'd hoped it would be. The sailboat wrapping paper mocked me with its cheerful boats sailing toward bright horizons. But there would be no bright horizons for me. There would be no party, no hugs from my grandson, no place at the table I'd dreamed of. I was alone, excluded from my own family, holding the keys to a future that no longer had any meaning. That night, sleep was impossible. I sat in Richard's old recliner, the one I could never bring myself to get rid of, staring at photo albums spread across my coffee table. Pictures of Sarah growing up, gap-toothed smiles, school concerts, graduation day. In every single photo, it was just the two of us. Her father, David, had walked out when she was 3. Just packed his bags one Tuesday morning and left a note on the kitchen counter. I can't do this anymore. Take care of Sarah. As if she were a houseplant he was leaving in my care. I'd worked at the diner from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., then cleaned offices from 4 p.m. to midnight, just to keep us in our tiny apartment. Sarah spent her afternoons at Mrs. Chen's daycare down the hall, $50 a week I could barely afford but had to pay. When I finally made it home each night, she'd already be asleep, and I'd sit on the edge of her bed, smoothing her hair and whispering promises that someday things would be better. But apparently, those whispered promises didn't count for anything now. I picked up my phone and called my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez. At 75, Maria had been like a mother to me for the past 20 years. She answered on the second ring. Blanche? Mija, it's almost midnight. What's wrong? Sarah uninvited me from Tommy's birthday party. The words came out in a rush, followed by fresh tears I thought I'd cried out hours ago. Maria was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. That boy has been filling her head with poison for months now. What do you mean? I didn't want to tell you, but I heard them talking in their backyard last month when I was watering my roses. Marcus was saying how you're too needy, how you guilt Sarah into spending time with you. He said something about cutting ties with negative influences. My hands started shaking. He said that about me? He's jealous, Blanche. He sees how much Sarah loves you and he can't stand it. Some men are like that. They need to be the only voice their wife hears. After I hung up with Maria, I couldn't stop thinking about all the little signs I'd ignored. How Marcus always had an excuse when I invited them for dinner. How Sarah had stopped calling me just to chat. How she'd begun repeating phrases that sounded nothing like her. Phrases like setting boundaries and emotional manipulation. 3 days later, I made a decision that surprised even me. I was going to that party. I knew I wasn't welcome, but I couldn't let my grandson's 5th birthday pass without seeing him. I'd give him his gift and leave quietly. Maybe seeing the deed to the beach house would help Sarah understand how much her family meant to me. Saturday arrived gray and drizzly. I dressed carefully in my best blue dress, the one Sarah had always said brought out my eyes, and drove to their house in the suburbs. The house I'd helped them buy with a $20,000 down payment gift 3 years ago. Cars lined their street. Marcus's family was clearly there in force. His parents' silver BMW, his sister's red SUV, what looked like half a dozen other vehicles I didn't recognize. I parked 2 blocks away and walked, carrying Tommy's present and the folder with the beach house deed. Through their front window, I could see the party in full swing. Balloons, streamers, children running around with party hats. And there was my Tommy, my beautiful grandson, laughing as he played with other kids. I rang the doorbell, my heart hammering against my ribs. Marcus answered. His face went from surprise to annoyance in the span of a heartbeat. Blanche? What are you doing here? I'm here for my grandson's birthday. Sarah told you that you weren't invited. I held up the present and the folder. I have something important for Tommy, something that can't wait. Marcus glanced over his shoulder, then stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind him. You need to leave. Now. You're not welcome here. He's my grandson, Marcus. I have every right. You have no rights here. His voice was cold, calculated. This is our house, our child, our family, and our family doesn't include people who can't respect boundaries. Before I could respond, the door opened and Sarah appeared. When she saw me, her face flushed with what looked like embarrassment. "Mom, what are you doing here? I told you not to come. I brought Tommy's present." I tried to step around Marcus, but he blocked my path. "Please, Sarah. Just let me give it to him. Then I'll leave. You're embarrassing us." Sarah's voice carried across the front yard, loud enough that I saw curtains twitching in neighbor windows. "Everyone's watching. Please just go." "Sarah, if you could just look at what I brought." "I don't care what you brought." Her voice rose to a near shout. "You can't just show up where you're not wanted and expect people to accommodate you. That's exactly the kind of behavior Marcus was talking about." The front door opened wider, and I could see party guests gathering behind Sarah, Marcus's parents, his sister, people I'd never met but who were apparently more family than I was. They stared at me like I was some kind of crazy person disrupting their perfect celebration. Tommy appeared beside his mother, his little face confused. "Grandma Blanche?" "Hi, sweetheart," I whispered, my voice breaking. Sarah immediately pulled him back inside. "Go play with your cousins, baby." I stood there on their doorstep, humiliated in front of strangers, holding gifts that would never be opened, feeling more alone than I had since the day David walked out of our lives. "Leave now, or I'm calling the police," Marcus said quietly. I set the present down on their porch and walked away, still clutching the deed to a $500,000 property that my grandson would never know existed. I drove home in a daze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had gone white. The humiliation burned in my chest like acid. The way Marcus had spoken to me, the way Sarah had shouted at me in front of strangers, the way my own grandson had been pulled away from me like I was some kind of threat. It replayed in my mind over and over until I thought I might be sick. When I finally made it to my house, I sat in my driveway for 20 minutes, unable to move. The deed to the beach house lay crumpled on my passenger seat where I'd thrown it in frustration. $500,000. My entire life savings. Richard's insurance money. Every penny I'd scraped together over decades of hard work. All intended for a grandson who would apparently never know it existed. I thought about Richard then, about what he would say if he were here. He'd loved Sarah like his own daughter, had walked her down the aisle at her wedding since her biological father was nowhere to be found. Richard would be heartbroken to see how she'd turned out. Inside my house, I poured myself a glass of wine, something I rarely did, and sat at my kitchen table with the phone book. It took me 3 glasses of wine to work up the courage to make the call I knew I had to make. "Morrison and Associates, this is Janet. I need to speak with Mr. Morrison." "Please, this is Blanche Patterson. He handled my husband's estate." 20 minutes later, Robert Morrison was at my kitchen table, looking at me with concern. He'd been Richard's lawyer for 15 years, and mine for the 3 years since Richard passed. "Blanche, are you sure about this? You've been planning this gift for months." I smoothed the wrinkled deed with my palm. "I'm sure. I want to change my will. I want to remove Sarah as my beneficiary." Robert frowned. "That's a big decision. Maybe you should take some time to think about it." "I've had 3 years to think about it, Robert. 3 years of watching my daughter pull away from me. 3 years of being treated like an inconvenience. Today she made it clear that I'm not part of her family anymore." I told him everything. The uninvitation, the humiliation, Marcus's manipulation. Robert listened without interrupting, occasionally shaking his head. "What do you want to do with your assets instead?" he asked finally. I hadn't thought that far ahead. "I don't know. A charity, maybe. The children's hospital where Tommy was born. At least they'll use the money to help kids who actually need it." Robert pulled out his laptop and began typing. "I'll draft the changes tonight. But Blanche, you should know. Once we file this, it's going to be very difficult to undo." "Good," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Maybe it's time Sarah learned that actions have consequences. After Robert left, I walked upstairs to what had been Richard's office. I'd kept it exactly the same since he died. His books on the shelves, his reading glasses on the desk, his favorite coffee mug still sitting next to his computer. This room had been his sanctuary, and now it would be mine. I opened his desk drawer and pulled out the folder where I kept all of Sarah's school photos. Every report card, every Mother's Day card she'd ever made me. There was the clay ashtray she'd made in 3rd grade, even though neither Richard nor I smoked. The friendship bracelet she'd woven for me when she was 10. A photo of the two of us at her high school graduation, both of us crying with happiness. Looking at these mementos, I felt a stab of doubt. Was I being too harsh? Was I letting my hurt feelings override my love for my daughter? Then I remembered the look on Marcus's face when he told me I had no rights. I remembered Sarah shouting at me in front of strangers. I remembered little Tommy being pulled away from me like I was dangerous. No, I wasn't being too harsh. I was finally standing up for myself. I picked up my phone and dialed the real estate agent who had helped me buy the beach house. Linda? This is Blanche Patterson. I need to put the Myrtle Beach property back on the market. Oh, I thought that was going to be a family property. Did something change? Everything had changed. It turns out my family doesn't want it. I'd like to sell it as soon as possible. Linda was efficient, as always. I can have it listed by Tuesday. Given the location and the condition, I think we can get asking price, maybe more. The summer market is hot right now. After I hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: freedom. For the first time since Richard died, I wasn't planning my life around Sarah's needs or Tommy's future. I was thinking about what I wanted. What did I want? The question felt foreign. For so long, everything had been about being the best mother I could be, the best grandmother, the best provider. I'd defined myself entirely by my relationships to other people. I walked to my bedroom and looked at myself in the full-length mirror. At 72, I was still healthy, still sharp, still capable. I had no chronic health problems, no mobility issues, no reason I couldn't live another 20 good years. 20 years that could be just for me. The beach house would sell for $500,000. Combined with my other savings and Richard's pension, I could do anything I wanted. I could travel. I could move somewhere warm. I could finally take those art classes I'd always dreamed about. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. For a moment, I considered answering. Maybe she was calling to apologize. Maybe she'd realized how badly she'd treated me. But then I remembered her words. You can't just show up where you're not wanted. I let the call go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, the phone rang again. Then again. By the 4th call, I turned the ringer off. I didn't need to hear whatever excuse or justification she was calling with. I'd made my decision, and for the first time in my adult life, I was putting myself first. The deed to the beach house lay on my dresser, and I picked it up one last time. Tomorrow, it would go on the market. Next week, it would probably be sold. And sometime soon, I would take that money and build a life that didn't depend on the approval or presence of people who clearly didn't value me. It felt terrifying and liberating all at once. 3 weeks passed in blissful silence. I hadn't heard from Sarah since that day she'd called repeatedly after the party disaster. I'd listened to her voicemails once, just once, and immediately deleted them. They were exactly what I'd expected. Justifications about why I'd embarrassed them, how I needed to respect their boundaries, how disappointed she was in my behavior. Not a single word of apology. Not one acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, excluding your mother from your child's birthday party was cruel. The beach house sold faster than Linda had predicted. A young couple from Charlotte fell in love with it the first day it was listed and offered full asking price with cash, $500,000, deposited into my account within 2 weeks. I was sitting in my garden, reading a travel brochure about Italy when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Patterson? This is Jeff Coleman from Coastal Properties. I had someone contact me asking about a beach house you recently sold in Myrtle Beach. My stomach dropped. What kind of someone? A woman named Sarah Marcus. She said she was your daughter and that there might have been some kind of misunderstanding about the sale. She wanted to know if we could reverse the transaction. I closed my eyes. Of course she'd found out. What did you tell her? Well, I explained that the sale was final, all papers signed, money transferred. She seemed pretty upset. She mentioned something about it being intended as a gift for her son. Mr. Coleman, that property was mine to sell. The sale stands. Oh, absolutely, Mrs. Patterson. I just thought you should know someone was asking about it. After I hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone. Part of me had wondered when this moment would come. Part of me had even been looking forward to it. The phone rang again an hour later. Sarah. This time I answered. Mom? Her voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the anger underneath. We need to talk. Do we? I know about the house. I said nothing. Mom, are you there? I said I know about the beach house. The one you sold. The one that was supposed to be Tommy's. Was it supposed to be Tommy's? Because I don't remember anyone caring about Tommy's gifts when I wasn't welcome at his birthday party. Silence. Then, that's what this is about? You sold a $500,000 house because you were mad about the party? The casual way she dismissed my pain, the way she reduced my heartbreak to being mad about the party, sent a surge of anger through me that surprised me with its intensity. I sold the house because I realized I was living in a fantasy. I thought I had a family who loved me. I was wrong. Mom, you're being ridiculous. Of course we love you. But love doesn't mean what, Sarah? Love doesn't mean including your mother in your child's birthday party. Love doesn't mean treating her with basic respect. You showed up uninvited. You embarrassed us in front of our friends. I showed up with a gift worth $500,000 for the grandson I'm apparently not allowed to see. Another silence. Longer this time. You're lying, but her voice had changed. Less certain. The deed is in my safe, Sarah. Or it was. I sold the house to a lovely young couple who actually wanted it. I could hear her breathing, quick and shallow. You can't have. You wouldn't have. I did. And I changed my will too. Congratulations, Sarah. You and Marcus got exactly what you wanted. You don't have to deal with your needy, embarrassing mother anymore. Mom, wait. Don't hang up. We can work this out. But I was done working things out. I was done being the one who always had to bend, who always had to understand, who always had to forgive. Give Tommy my love, I said and hung up. The phone immediately started ringing again. I turned it off. An hour later, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Sarah standing on my porch, and behind her, Marcus. She was crying. He looked furious. I didn't open the door. Mom, please, Sarah called through the door. We need to talk about this. You can't just cut us off over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. That's what she was calling it now. Marcus stepped forward and I could see him trying to look through my front window. Blanche, open the door. We need to discuss this like adults. Like adults? The irony was almost funny. When had he ever treated me like an adult? When had either of them? Mom, Marcus is sorry about what happened at the party. We both are. But selling the house was extreme. That money could have secured Tommy's future. I pressed my back against the door, listening to them but not responding. We know you're in there, Marcus said, his voice getting harder. Your car is in the driveway. Stop acting like a child and open the door. Acting like a child. There it was again. The constant implication that I was the problem, that my feelings were invalid, that I was being unreasonable. They stayed on my porch for 20 minutes, alternating between pleading and demanding. Sarah cried. Marcus threatened to call the police for a wellness check. Finally, they left. I watched from my upstairs window as they sat in their car in my driveway for another 10 minutes, Marcus on his phone, Sarah wiping her eyes. Then Marcus started the engine and they drove away. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because I was upset, but because I was energized. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own life. I wasn't waiting for Sarah to call, wasn't planning my schedule around her convenience, wasn't walking on eggshells to avoid upsetting Marcus. I was free. At 2 a.m, I got up and turned my phone back on. 17 missed calls, 12 from Sarah, 5 from numbers I didn't recognize, probably Marcus calling from different phones. There were also text messages. Mom, please call me back. We can fix this. This is insane. You're destroying our family over nothing. Think about Tommy. Think about what you're taking away from him. I deleted them all without reading the rest. Then I opened my laptop and started researching senior communities in Florida. Somewhere warm, where I could make new friends, where nobody knew about my ungrateful daughter or my manipulative son-in-law. Somewhere I could start over. The morning sun was coming through my bedroom window when I finally fell asleep, and for the first time in months, I didn't dream about my family at all. 6 months had passed since I'd moved to Sunset Gardens, a charming senior community in Sarasota. My new apartment overlooked a lake where egrets waded in the early morning mist, and I'd made more genuine friends in 6 months than I'd had in the last 6 years back home. I was volunteering at the community library, had joined a book club, and was taking watercolor painting classes. For the first time since Richard died, I felt truly alive. The knock on my door came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reading on my small balcony. I wasn't expecting anyone. My friend Dorothy and I weren't supposed to meet for bridge until Thursday. When I opened the door, I found myself looking down at a small face I recognized immediately, even though he'd grown taller since I'd last seen him. Grandma Blanche? Tommy stood in my hallway, holding the hand of a woman I didn't recognize. He looked uncertain, maybe even scared, but when he saw me, his face broke into that smile that had always melted my heart. Tommy? I dropped to my knees, not caring about my arthritis. Sweetheart, what are you doing here? How did you find me? The woman stepped forward. She was probably in her 50s, with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Mrs. Patterson? I'm Janet Chen, Mrs. Chen's daughter. You might remember my mother from when Sarah was little. Of course I remembered Mrs. Chen. She'd been my lifesaver during those years when I was working multiple jobs, watching Sarah when I couldn't afford proper childcare. My mother asked me to bring Tommy to see you. She's been worried about you both. I stood up slowly, still holding Tommy's small hand. Does Sarah know you're here? Janet's expression darkened. Sarah doesn't know anything. She and that husband of hers have been telling Tommy that you moved away because you didn't want to see him anymore. The cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. They told him what? Tommy tugged on my hand. Mama said you got tired of being my grandma. She said you wanted to live somewhere where kids weren't allowed. I felt tears spring to my eyes. How could Sarah have said such things to her own child? How could she have made Tommy think that I'd abandoned him? Oh, sweetheart, I whispered, kneeling down again so we were eye to eye. That's not true. Not any of it. I love being your grandma more than anything in the whole world. Then why did you go away? Janet cleared her throat gently. Mrs. Patterson, may we come in? There's quite a bit Tommy needs to know. I led them to my small living room, my mind racing. Tommy climbed onto my couch like he'd done it 1,000 times before, and for a moment, I was transported back to all those afternoons when he was smaller, when Sarah would bring him to visit, and we'd read books together. Tommy, Janet said gently, your grandma Blanche didn't move away because she was tired of you. She moved away because your parents hurt her feelings very badly. Tommy frowned. Hurt her feelings how? I looked at Janet, unsure how much a 6-year-old could understand about adult cruelty. But Janet nodded encouragingly. Do you remember your 5th birthday party? I asked carefully. Tommy nodded. Yeah, it was fun, but I was sad you weren't there. Mama said you were sick. Another lie. I wasn't sick, sweetheart. Your mama told me I couldn't come to your party. His small face scrunched up in confusion. But why? You always came to my parties before. How do you explain manipulation and cruelty to a 6-year-old? How do you tell a child that his father has been poisoning his mother against his grandmother? Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, I said finally. Your daddy made your mama think that I was bothering her too much, so she decided I shouldn't come to your party. But I wanted you there, Tommy said, his voice small. I wanted to be there too. In fact, I had a very special present for you. Tommy perked up. What kind of present? Janet was watching me carefully, and I realized she knew. Somehow Mrs. Chen had found out about the beach house. I bought you a house, Tommy. A house right by the ocean, with your own private beach where we could build sandcastles and look for seashells. Tommy's eyes went wide. A whole house? Just for me? Just for you. I was going to give you the key at your birthday party, but when your mama said I couldn't come, I decided to sell it instead. You sold my house. His voice was so disappointed that it broke my heart all over again. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I was very sad that your mama didn't want me at your party, And I thought maybe you didn't want the house either. Tommy was quiet for a long time, processing this information. Then he said, Daddy doesn't like you very much, does he? The perceptiveness of children always amazed me. No, sweetheart. I don't think he does. He says you're too needy. What does that mean? I exchanged glances with Janet. Even at 6, Tommy was picking up on the tension, the things said when adults thought he wasn't listening. It means your daddy thinks I want to spend too much time with you and your mama. But I like spending time with you, Tommy said matter-of-factly. You read me good stories and you make the best pancakes, and you don't get mad when I spill things. Those simple words did what months of anger and hurt hadn't been able to do. They broke down the last of my defenses. I pulled Tommy into a hug, breathing in the sweet smell of his hair, feeling his small arms wrap around my neck. I miss you so much, Grandma Blanche, he whispered against my shoulder. I miss you too, baby. Every single day. Janet cleared her throat again. Mrs. Patterson, there's something else you should know. Mrs. Chen has been watching this situation, and she's concerned about Tommy. She says Sarah has been different since she married Marcus. Distant. Sometimes she seems scared. I pulled back to look at Tommy. Scared of what? Daddy yells a lot, Tommy said quietly. Especially at Mama. Sometimes she cries after he yells. A chill ran down my spine. I'd been so focused on my own hurt that I hadn't considered what might be happening in that house. What Marcus might be doing to Sarah behind closed doors. Tommy, does your daddy ever yell at you? Tommy shook his head. Not really. But he doesn't like me very much either. He says I'm too loud and I ask too many questions. My heart ached for this sweet boy who was growing up thinking he was too much. Too loud, too curious, the same way his mother had been made to feel about me. Mrs. Patterson, Janet said carefully, my mother thinks Sarah might need help, but she's too proud to ask for it and too scared to leave. I looked down at Tommy, who was playing with a small toy car he'd pulled from his pocket, and I realized something important. This wasn't just about me anymore. This wasn't just about my hurt feelings or my wounded pride. This was about protecting my family, even the part of my family that had hurt me. What can I do? I asked Janet. My mother has a plan, but first she needs to know, do you still love Sarah? Despite everything, I looked at Tommy's innocent face, thought about the little girl Sarah had been before Marcus got his claws into her, and I knew the answer. Yes, I said, I do. Mrs. Chen's plan was simple but brilliant. Over the next 3 months, she would gradually rebuild the relationship between Tommy and me, arranging accidental meetings at the park when Marcus was at work. She would plant seeds of doubt in Sarah's mind about Marcus's treatment of both Tommy and me. And most importantly, she would document everything. The yelling, the isolation, the emotional manipulation. The first time I saw Sarah again was at a playground on a Thursday afternoon. Mrs. Chen had texted me that they would be there, and my hands shook as I walked across the parking lot. Sarah was sitting on a bench, watching Tommy play on the swings. She looked thinner than I remembered, more fragile somehow. When she saw me approaching, her whole body went rigid. What are you doing here? She asked. But there wasn't anger in her voice anymore, just exhaustion. Tommy asked me to come, I said simply, sitting down beside her. He misses me. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. You can't just show up like this. Marcus will be furious if he finds out. Why does Marcus get to decide who you and Tommy see? She was quiet for a long time, watching our grandson laugh as he pumped his legs to make the swing go higher. Finally, she said, I've made such a mess of everything, haven't I? We all make mistakes, sweetheart. I said terrible things to you, at the party and after. I let Marcus convince me that you were the problem, that you were trying to control me. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Mrs. Chen told me about the beach house, about what you were going to give Tommy. I nodded but didn't say anything. $500,000, Mom. You were going to give him $500,000. And I treated you like you were nothing. The money doesn't matter, Sarah. It does matter. It matters because it shows how much you love him, how much you've always loved both of us. And I threw it away because Marcus made me believe that love was suffocation. Tommy ran over to us, breathless and happy. Grandma Blanche, Did you see how high I swung?" "I did, sweetheart. You're getting so big and strong." He climbed onto the bench between Sarah and me, and for a moment, we were just a normal family at a playground. "Mama," Tommy said, "why can't Grandma Blanche come to our house anymore?" Sarah looked at me, then back at Tommy. "It's complicated, baby. Daddy says she's not family anymore, but she feels like family to me." Sarah's face crumpled. "She is family, Tommy. She's the most important family we have." That was the beginning. Over the following weeks, Sarah and I met secretly, always when Marcus was at work, always with Mrs. Chen's help. Sarah told me things that made my blood run cold. How Marcus had isolated her from all her old friends. How he controlled their finances, their social life, even what she wore. How he'd convinced her that I was toxic, manipulative, a bad influence on Tommy. "He said you were trying to buy my love with money," Sarah confessed one afternoon. "He said rich people always think they can control others with their wealth. And you believed him? He was so convincing. He had an answer for everything. When you offered to help with the house down payment, he said you were trying to make us dependent on you. When you bought Tommy expensive gifts, he said you were spoiling him to make me look bad." I saw it all clearly now, the systematic way Marcus had poisoned her mind against me, turning every act of love into something sinister. "But Mom," Sarah continued, "I want you to know that deep down, I always knew. I knew you loved us. I knew you weren't trying to hurt me. But admitting that would have meant admitting that Marcus was wrong about everything, and I wasn't ready for that." The breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Sarah showed up at my apartment in Sarasota unannounced, Tommy in tow, both of them carrying suitcases. "We left," she said simply when I opened the door. "I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't let him turn my son into someone who thinks he's too much, too loud, too everything. I couldn't let him keep us away from the person who loves us most." I pulled them both into my small apartment, my heart pounding with relief and terror. "What about Marcus? Won't he come looking for you?" "Let him try," Sarah said, and there was steel in her voice that I hadn't heard since she was a teenager. "I've already filed for divorce. Mrs. Chen helped me find a lawyer, one who specializes in emotional abuse cases." Over the following months, Sarah and Tommy stayed with me while she rebuilt her life. She got a job at a local veterinary clinic. She'd always loved animals, but had given up that dream when Marcus convinced her it wasn't practical. Tommy started school in Sarasota and blossomed without his father's constant criticism. Marcus fought the divorce bitterly, but Sarah had documentation of his emotional abuse, recordings Mrs. Chen had helped her make of his tirades. He was granted supervised visitation with Tommy twice a month, but Tommy rarely wanted to go. "He's different when you're around, Grandma Blanche," Tommy told me one evening as we sat on my balcony watching the sunset. "Mama smiles more. And she doesn't jump when the phone rings." A year after they'd moved in with me, Sarah came home from work with an envelope in her hands. "It's the final divorce decree," she said. "It's over." That night, we celebrated with ice cream and a movie, just the three of us curled up on my couch. Sarah had her head on my shoulder, and Tommy was sprawled across both our laps, and I felt a peace I hadn't experienced since Richard was alive. "Mom," Sarah said during a quiet moment in the movie, "I know I can never fully make up for what I did to you, for what I said, for what I believed about you." "You don't need to make up for anything," I told her. "You were being manipulated by someone who claimed to love you. That's not your fault. But I hurt you. I kept Tommy away from you. I made you sell that beautiful house. I stroked her hair the way I used to when she was little and had nightmares. We can't change the past, sweetheart, but we can build a beautiful future." And we did. Sarah and Tommy eventually moved into their own place, a small house just 10 minutes from my apartment. We had dinner together twice a week, and Tommy spent every Saturday night with me, just like old times. I never bought another beach house for Tommy. He didn't need me to prove my love with grand gestures anymore. Instead, I love him with presence, with attention, with the simple gift of being available whenever he needs me. Last week, Tommy drew me a picture at school. It was of the three of us, Sarah, Tommy, and me, standing in front of a house with a big sun overhead and flowers in the yard. At the bottom, in his careful 7-year-old handwriting, he'd written, "My family," not "part of my family" or "visiting family," just "my family." That's all I'd ever wanted, to belong, to matter, to be loved not for what I could provide, but for who I was. At 73, I finally have that, and it was worth every painful step it took to get here. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.